Hi, I'm Felbrig. Now, ACHTUNG Cthulhu caught my attention because, as a Lovecraftian nut and a producer of the Cthulhu podcast, I love everything that's got Lovecraft in it. And ACHTUNG Cthulhu combines that wonderful love of Lovecraft with a World War II background. It's basically World War II with tentacles. So I bought the PDF from DriveThruRPG and was rather delighted to get two versions of the PDF. One is for the on-screen and another is print-friendly, and it would still use up a lot of ink, but it's considerably less than the on-screen version. Now, as an overview of what you get in this book, consider it this. It's a scenario, a really jolly good one, with a tacked-on rule system. It's actually using a separate system called the PDQ system, but it's using it and modifying it to use it within the World War II era, and of course to add on some madness features. This is apparently the first in the 0 Point World War II series, and I am looking forward to getting those that come next. As I've said, it's really nice to look at. It is beautiful. The font choices are perfect. The art style is very evocative, and it really presented itself to me as something I want to get to the table really pretty quickly. It's presented as though it were a dossier that was handed over to some agents. As you're looking at the pages, they actually look like they've been printed out on loose-leaf dossier style, and photographs have been taped in onto the pages. It really does look spectacular. But let's get into what's actually in there. Well, char gen, or character gen for PDQ, is really quite simple. Each character is going to have 3 qualities. These are... how do you describe a quality? Like an aspect. It casts a shadow over quite a few different possible skills. As well as these 3 qualities, you're also going to have a number of techniques. These are refined areas of your qualities. So if your quality was soldier, you might have rifleman as a technique, and that'll give you an extra roll or an extra bonus when you're actually using a rifle, as opposed to the skills you'd get for hand-to-hand fighting, which just come under the soldier quality. You also have to choose a weakness, and this is a negative quality, if you like. The task resolution system itself is simplicity. You roll 2d6, add any appropriate quality or techniques, or weakness, I suppose, and if you reach the target score, you're successful, and if you don't, you fail. Very simple, very straightforward, and doesn't get in the way of the game's story. Interestingly enough, there are no hit points, but when you take damage, you actually lower down your qualities or your techniques, and you get that back rather than taking magical potions by having recovery scenes. It's really quite good at driving a story technique. There's also an XP system that goes along with this, but they call it, because it's World War II, training points. So obviously your soldier or your academic can go on to a specialist course and learn some new skills. I really like the way they've dealt with the Lovecraftian madness, the insanity that gets driven by seeing the obscure and the strange and the, frankly impossible. Rather than having a separate sanity score like the Call of Cthulhu system does, they apply it to your qualities and to your techniques. So all your skills, if you like, go down. And of course you can rationalise that through play, because if your character's obsessing with furry things in the dark somewhere, then they're not able to concentrate on aiming their rifle because they think there might be one of those dark furry things just round the corner. It's really quite clever. If you see too many mad things that would affect your sanity and you basically lose everything, you have to roll a special 0 out die, as they call it, which will have various effects. For instance, it might put you into a fighting frenzy. It might cause you to run away, or it could give you an obsession or any of a number of other effects. Really very well thought out. There is an optional rule here as well. If your character does go mad like this, you can gain some mythos dice, and you can use these later on to add to a roll or burn them for more information. So if you were doing an investigation, you could burn a madness die in order to have a piece of inspiration or to find something that was hidden. That's decided on by the GM. It's GM fiat, I suppose. The PDQ systems extends its qualities system not just for characters, but for things as well. For instance, vehicles will have qualities. For instance, one might have a +2 maneuverable, or a +4 armoured if it's a tank. And these qualities could also be negative, so you could have a weakness associated with a vehicle. For instance, it might not be good in the rain, so you might say temperamental in the wet as a weakness for it. There's also an optional action dice mechanic, which you'll have to agree to use at the beginning. This is for making the game more pulpy, I suppose. They're quite like the Mythos dice. You can use them to get an extra roll, you can burn the die for a flat bonus, or you can burn it for information, again at GM fiat. The monsters that come in this book are pretty good as well. They've covered all the basic Lovecraftian things, such as Byakhis, ghouls and shoggoths. And again, they all have specialist qualities that give you a real feel for how that monster should be used in play. It's driving the story. For instance, it could have a +4 blood drain, or a +6 nightmarish strength. The text, they're not just saying it's got strength 10, they're saying it's got nightmarish strength, and you need to use that when you're playing the game to bring some life and put some real bones on the basic stats that you've got for the monsters. Now, after you've got past these rules, things get really interesting. You're into the first scenario, which is called Three Kings. And it makes up the majority of the book. The PDQ system itself is very simple, very straightforward, but gets out of the way by page 25 of this book. From 25 up to 63 is this scenario. Now, I don't want to give too much away about this scenario, but it is set at the beginning of the war. You get dropped behind enemy lines in Czechoslovakia, and you're investigating rumours of terrible, horrible atrocities that are going on. There are Nazis, there's the Wehrmacht, there's mad scientists, and serious resistance fighters. And there's also two main inns for this scenario. It's not just for soldiers. They've given you an alternative lead-in for academics that are behind enemy lines. And that's really quite clever. It means you can have any type of character you want. The scenario itself is broken down into episodes, and each with a number of scenes. This is still a sandbox scenario, however. These are key points or key frames that you can drop into your scenario. For instance, you might come across this scene, or when you go into a certain place, this thing will happen. It's that kind of presentation, but they have given it to you in a series of scenes, and they're all fairly dramatic and the way they've presented them, and it builds to a huge climax. The scenes are well laid out. They're also interspersed with, as I've mentioned already, this really marvellous art, and there's some very nice maps in here too. I also like the fact that they've given you some really nice NPCs that they've fleshed out for you, such as Sergeant Jack Killer Killarney. And there's also some wonderful secret dossier handout pages at the back. And as I mentioned about the layout and the way they've made it look like a dossier, this is something you could print out, and the players are really going to enjoy getting their hands on this stuff. It's something they can go back to, reference. It might be something their characters are actually seeing and carrying with them. It's a really tremendous addition to the game. So in summary, it's beautiful. It's an easy-to-get system. If you've never used PDQ before, I think you're going to read through the first 25 pages of this book and you'll have a very good understanding and be able to get straight on with the game. It's tremendously well written, and I'm really looking forward to getting this to the table.